Hello internet, I'm not much of a YouTuber, but Skip the Tutorial's recent video on Undertale kinda rubs me the wrong way. Watching it, he instantly dismissed the idea of doing this no dodging challenge in a pacifist run, but he didn't sound like he'd actually given it much of an attempt. He didn't, for example, name any particular bosses or monsters as roadblocks. He just said it didn't sound possible due to the low health cap, and honestly, isn't that the sort of fun nonsense worth looking into? So I decided to give the run a try myself. This is the no dodging pacifist run. I'm calling it the no dodging run rather than a without moving your soul run because you move your soul every time you select an option from the fight menu, and because Mettaton and Asgore both require you to move your soul to make choices. I also decided I'm not allowed to move the shield to block Undying's attacks, since that would require moving with the arrow keys while in the bullet dodging segment. A few quick disclaimers: this run requires you to beat the game once prior, or suspend your rules for Photoshop Flowey, because no matter what you come equipped with, you cannot get past stage 1 of Photoshop Flowey without dodging. Trust me, I tried. A lot. We'll go over it. Disclaimer 2, I'm not perfect. Several hours of this did tire me out and sometimes I accidentally moved the soul. When that happened, I immediately suicided to make up for it. Also, for some reason I encountered a bug where anytime my save got reloaded, my character was automatically walking up for a few seconds. It only really impacted me during the Flowey fight, but you might notice it if you decide to watch the raw footage, so you know. Heads up if you do that. Let's get started. For my first run I actually had a super easy time in the ruins. I even got Tutorial's house without a scratch. This is because most of the monsters are easy to spare turn 1, such as Mold's Maul and Windsun. Migo SP can be spared turn 2 and won't attack at all if you spare his allies turn 1, so overall pretty easy. I grabbed the bow so I don't get destroyed fighting Toriel here, and I grabbed the spider donut which I saved for Miss Muffet along with the pie for Asgore. Snowdin was a breeze as well. My first run I got an instant spare on Snowdrake via heckling, and some extra cash via stealing Icecap's hat. Papyrus would be impossible, but luckily he'll give you the option to skip the fight if you lose 3 times to him, so it all worked out eventually. Just ugh. That wait. For giggles I tried to see if I could brute force it through his fight with healing items and extra health, but nope. Waterfall is actually pretty tough, because here you start encountering monsters that are harder to spare, like Aaron, or practically impossible like Washua. Running is your friend here? When I reached the Mad Dummy, I found my first true challenge. The Mad Dummy does a lot of damage. So much so that you need to be healing every turn for at least the first 3-4 turns. By the time he pulled out the heat-seeking missiles I was out of healing items, and died. I tried again with the Skip the Tutorial toted dog residue, hoping I could crank out a few dog salads mid-fight, but that never worked very well. I got very close a few times but always died on his last attack. The big problem with the Mad Dummy is that this fight takes place in the dump. You can't backtrack for more items, and you can't use the storage box either. I actually found myself in a sort of self-imposed soft luck here and eventually decided I had no choice but to restart. So I ran through the ruins again. I worked my way all the way up to the Mad Dummy, but this time I had a secret weapon. Bicycles. No, not that kind. Bicycles are an item you can buy in Snowdin. They only heal for 11 horsepower, but here's the kicker, you can use them twice. So I kissed my dog residue goodbye and loaded up. Unfortunately, that wasn't enough. Mad Dummy's second and third attack together do just a bit too much damage for the mighty bicycle to heal up alone, so I grabbed an astronaut food from the cooler and finally had the push I needed to get past the Mad Dummy. At this point I thought the game would be easy, because now we can get the Temmie armor. Unfortunately, getting that armor turned out to be a bit harder than I thought. The fastest way to do it at this point is to walk back and forth between Jerson and Temmie, buying tea from the turtle and selling them at a 20 to 30 gold profit with Tem. But of course, some of the hardest enemies in the area are on that path, so you risk dying every time you make the trip. But it's all worth it for that sweet Tem armor. When I got to Undying I was pretty confident I could tank my way through without blocking her bullets. And I was right. Curiously, I found that the yellow bullets that normally hop around the screen we got blocked even when I wasn't moving the shield. That was pretty weird. Did I just stumble upon a weird no moving specific glitch? Whatever the case, it was time for Hotlands. I noticed Skip the tutorial seems to gloss over the Mettaton bit. And I think it deserves talking about because here's where you face the first real threat to the challenge. His quiz show. So for those who don't know, the quiz show is designed to be impossible to lose. Mettaton will zap you down to half health each time you lose a question, but when you reach 1 horsepower he jumps to the final question to keep from killing you. The problem is, this question has no time limit. So we can just wait out the timer. Which means we have to move. I'm really surprised Skip the tutorial didn't mention this part, but I was absolutely stuck. But he ruled it was okay to make a choice on the Asgore fight, so eventually I sucked it up and picked a button. I have to admit I was a bit apprehensive about the 2 guards, because I figured I wouldn't be able to rub the breastplate. Luckily it ended up bouncing back and forth over my cursor of its own accord, so hurrah! Luigi wins by doing absolutely nothing. Finally we make it to the core. The monsters here are really crazy. Night Knight takes a lot of turns to spare, but he has nothing on magic. Holy crap you guys. His chaser orbs will hunt you down, and no matter what equipment I wear, from Temi armor to notebooks, there are just not enough invincibility frames to deal with him. At first I thought he was impossible to spare, but then I realized he'll let you go if you stare at him. Even though it makes you dizzy. Gotta take that win where you can find it. Mettaton himself is pretty easy, just keep pulling a heel turn and the audience will eat it up as you get pummeled turn after turn. Asgore had me a bit worried at first, but honestly, he's a big fuzzy pushover. I beat him to near death with my frying pan. It was not hard. Just pop a bit of pie for your first heal, and chomp down those bicycles for the rest of his fight. So then I got to Photoshop Flowey and I tried guys, but it's not happening. I thought maybe his HP would carry over between attempts, but it doesn't. I hoped maybe at the very least the RNG would work. Or maybe the fight would assume you're going to get hit a lot of move you to the first soul after a bit. But it wasn't happening. After I exhausted his dialogue I gave up and started moving. This might sound like a break from the challenge, but Skip the tutorial's rules stated you could use a file from a previous run, so technically this isn't a run ender. You just need to start your run from the ruins of an old file, a file that's already beat Flowey. I didn't have one handy, the only save I had was from a genocide run, so I hope you'll excuse me for doing it the old-fashioned way. We're in the home stretch, we just have to beat the true lab and Asriel. The hardest monster in the lab was definitely the Reaper bird. That guy just swarms you with bugs, and if you're not healed up before he does it, you're going down. You really have to watch his turn patterns to get through this one. The easiest was Snowdrake's mom. She didn't even try to hit me. And now we get to Asriel. You know, I came into this fight thinking it would be easy. Pacifist Run had a bit of a reputation for having a boss you can't lose to. Well, I'm pleased to say we fixed that problem. Because even with the Tem armor, this was the second time I found myself in a soft lock. The fight started out promising enough. I'd hope when I had plenty of health and heal up when I got low. But he has this one attack, Chaos Buster. Oh boy. First he fires 9 separate waves of pulse attacks, all spaced almost perfectly to dodge your invincibility frames, and then he follows it up with a pulse attack? This attack is pretty special because it can bring you down from full health all the way to dead. And there's just not a lot you can do about it. Hypothetically you could use Hope one turn before, but then you'd be going in with less HP. I was thinking that because of the auto-revive thing this fight has going on, I could come back and just continue the fight like nothing ever happened, but that's not how this works. This fight has checkpoints, and when you die you get sent back to that checkpoint. And there's a lot of Chaos Busters between you and the next checkpoint. I was stuck for 10 minutes. And then I realized, this was a soft lock. I was going to be looping forever. So I closed the game and rethought my strategy. The problem this time wasn't healing items. It was invincibility frames. The frying pan wasn't going to cut it. I could wear the clouded glasses and notebook, but then I'd be losing the defense and HP buffs of the Tem armor. So I compromised, and went in with Tem armor and a notebook. This gives you just enough frames to just barely get through the blaster. Usually, you'll still die a few times. But it seemed like that was the push I needed to get through the fight. Finally I had proven, once and for all, that this can be done. You can be a complete idiot who refuses to dodge bullets, and a pacifist. Haha, this took me 6 hours.